Katie was born with impaired hearing and was diagnosed with Usher syndrome, a deaf-blind condition, in her 20s. 2 years ago, she was declared legally blind, and the very next day she was on the phone to Triathlon Australia inquiring about competing as a vision-impaired athlete. 2 weeks ago, Katie represented Australia in Paratriathlon, the Rio Games, and what's more, she brought home the gold medal. We asked Katie to speak at the conference because we believe she's a great example of achievement values. Katie is currently creating the Sport Access Foundation, which serves to remove barriers for children with a disability to play sport. Please join me in welcoming Olympic champion Katie Kelly to the stage.
Thank you for that lovely welcome. It's so wonderful to be here, and I'm here today to tell you how I found myself in the hand of this gold medal some 2 weeks ago. Thank you. So my story is a pretty simple one in many ways, and like many of you, I was from a country town, a little country town in Casino. Brought up with great family and friends. Part of that was sport was a big part of, country town, played everything. I guess the difference for me was something wasn't quite right about my hearing. My mum and dad picked up on it. Back in those days, in the 80s, they'd take you to the doctor, and he just clapped in my ears and said, no, she's fine, her hearing's fine, because I was like, oh yeah, I could hear that. I went to school, and at about 5 or 6, my teacher picked up on it and went to the audiologist, and they found that I had a hearing loss. So for me, I guess that shaped a lot of things where I was as a kid. I was always trying to catch up. I had a lot of speech therapy, and I remember the speech therapist coming to my school and hiding. I didn't want to be seen to be different. I want to be the same as everyone else. But I really had to work hard, I think, to catch up. Just to catch up with my peers and that sort of thing. So I went on to, had a great education and was always been passionate about sports. I did my Bachelor of Arts at Griffith Uni and eventually a Master's degree at UTS. And I started a remarkable career in sports marketing. My first job out of uni was with the NRL, and it was a dream job for me. And then I went on to work for other organisations like Tabcorp, ANZ Stadium, and all the while I've always been very fit and active. So I've done many things like the Sydney Morning Herald half marathon. I did the New York Marathon when I turned 30, and then eventually the Ironman. In between all of that, in my early 20s, I found out that I had this condition called Usher syndrome, and I'll talk about that. And then 2 weeks ago, I find myself competing at the Rio Paralympics in the sport of Paratriathlon, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. So Usher syndrome, it's a strange one. It's a very rare condition. It's a deaf-blind condition. I can still see well centrally, but essentially you're losing your vision and your hearing. It's a genetic condition and there's no cure. So I was the lucky one of the 5 kids to be landed with the Usher syndrome. But so in my early 20s, I was working at the NRL at the time, and I had to see an ophthalmologist here in Sydney, and it was a very clinical diagnosis. He said he did all the eye tests, and they dilate your eyes, and you're literally blind, you can't see. And he said, Katie, the reason for your hearing loss is you have this condition called Usher syndrome. It's correlated, so gradually you're going to lose your hearing, you're going to lose your sight. And for me, I was finally at that point in my life where I was feeling confident, I was working in this great job, and I was really getting a good sense of myself. And I thought, bloody hell, what else are you going to take away from me? But I think it just spurred me on, and it just made me think time is of the essence, and I really need to make the most of what I've got. And shortly after that, I took up a job with Melbourne Storm, and I had a fantastic time there. So hard news to take, but it is what it is. I wanted to talk about Stella Young. Many of you would know Stella Young. We lost her in December 2014. Just a great advocate for people with disabilities, and all about promoting, embracing our differences, about encouraging the workplace, in your own backyard, of making opportunities available for people with disabilities to assimilate in normal everyday life. And I love this quote that she has: disability doesn't make you exceptional, but questioning what you think you know about it does. And I think that applies to a lot of things in our lives about we are all exceptional people here, you are all exceptional in what you do, but what you do with that is what, and questioning what you do. And so I'll just show this video, just a 1 minute of her on Q&A, and it just gives you a sense of what she was about.
7 years is too long. There are people living in dire situations today in our communities. You know, the Productivity Commission heard some appalling stories from people. People with disabilities live second-class lives in Australia, and it's not okay anymore. But the government can no longer ignore it because they have the Productivity Commission's report that has said the system is broken. And, you know, I use the term system loosely, really, because it's just ridiculous. It needs to happen soon. I'm actually quite encouraged by how quickly the Gillard government has acted on the report. They were entitled to sit on it for 25 parliamentary sitting days, and they only had it for 10. And Julia Gillard will go to COAG this Friday to try and get some support from the states. So I think that as activists, what we need to be doing is to keep up the volume, keep telling the stories of the desperate situations people are in, and we need to keep the pressure on so that it may not take 7 years.
And what a lady she was. And Stella really came into my life. It was December 2014, and I had a situation where I was working and I felt I was being discriminated. They had some unusual requests about wanting medical documents about my condition. It was a very strange situation I was in. She had died 2 days before, and I remember thinking, what would Stella Young do? And I could hear her say, Katie, just stand up for yourself. You don't need to put up with this. And it was a real changing point for me because I think finally, and they say life begins at 40, I was just about to turn 40, and I think finally for me I thought, I am who I am and I have all these wonderful gifts, and I might not be the most intelligent person on the team, but I'm intelligent in many other different ways. And it was that moment of just really accepting and embracing and thinking, I want to make a difference. And I thought of Stella Young and what she's done, and I thought it's time for me to move on in many ways. And I think I just lifted in another sort of, I guess, emotional maturity level. And it was interesting how many things have happened since then, and there I was 2 weeks ago. So I just wanted to show you this slide to give you an idea of the time frame of what's happened to me in the last 2 years. So then in January 2015, I had to see my ophthalmologist in Parramatta. I hadn't seen her for 5 years, because they just do a checkup to see how your eyesight and that is. There's nothing they can do, it just slowly deteriorates. And I knew it's been deteriorating, like it's really lots of things I have to do every day to modify and adapt to get around. Anyway, she said, Katie, how are you going? What have you been up to? And I said, well, I was in Sydney and I moved to Newcastle. I was working in Newcastle Knights and Jets, and I did that for lifestyle reasons, and Sydney was getting too hard. And then I said I took a job up in Darwin, a year contract, and I had a great time there. I moved back to Newcastle, and I said, in the meantime, I did the Port Macquarie Ironman and a few other things. She said, so you're coping okay? I said, yeah, I think I'm coping okay. So then she said, well, she did all the tests again and diluted my eyes, and she came back and said, look, your eyesight's at the point now that you're actually legally blind. And so when I heard that, she's like, you need to start thinking about using a cane stick. You're going to need a guide dog eventually. And for me, again, it's that news of just, I knew that was coming, and I was in the taxi and I rang my sister, who's a great friend, and had a few tears, and good sister love. She's like, well, you knew that was coming, you know, sort of get on with it. Well, oh, okay. And so sure enough, I was thinking, well, you know how they talk about make your disadvantages into advantages. And I'm thinking, I've always wanted to do Hawaii Ironman. You know, I love putting myself through pain. Hawaii Ironman is like an endurance event. It's insane distance, swim, bike, run, and takes all day to do it. And I thought maybe there's a way I can get in and use this vision impaired ticket. So I was in the taxi, I was heading back to work from Parramatta to Sydney Olympic Park. I was talking to my sister. I actually rang Triathlon Australia that afternoon to enquire, and they rang me back, and I spoke to the head of Paratriathlon program, and she said, Katie, have you heard about Paratriathlon? It's evolving, it's going to debut at Rio, we've got a classification for vision impaired. It's part of the elite program. It's funded by the AIS. Would you be interested? I'm like, sure, you know, great. So I did my first race with a local guide at the Gold Coast in March 2015. Won that race. They could see that I was competitive, and then it all just went full steam. I moved to Canberra. I was at the AIS. I was getting funded, and then they teamed me up with none other than McKeely Jones as my guide. Now, McKeely Jones is like the Ian Thorpe of swimming. She's done it all. She won the silver medal at the Sydney Olympics. She was the first Australian woman to win the Hawaii Ironman. And so when my coach said, do you want to know who your guide is? McKeely Jones. And I thought, boy, this is getting serious. So McKeely and I went on to race together. And then we had to finish in the top 10 in the world. So we had like 8 months to do it. So we raced in Yokohama in Italy. It was amazing, all these places I was getting taken to. And we had to finish top 10 in the world to qualify at the World Championships in Chicago 12 months ago, September last year. So you can see how quickly all this has happened. So there we were in Chicago on the start line, and we win. So there I am, world champion 2015. And then of course we head on to Rio. So I'll just show you this video. It's actually just after Chicago, after we win that race and we qualify a spot for Rio. Started racing in the elite level since February this year after I was diagnosed legally blind. So first world champs, and just incredible to be here and to get that result.
You know, it's amazing being a guide. You know, these athletes are so awesome, so dedicated, and you know, Katie is an amazing athlete, and I'm just glad that I get to share some of her journey. And I think that's what inspires me the most. That you know, I can come out and use my experience, my last 27 years of racing, I get to use that knowledge to help her a little bit.
In first place, and your world champion, representing Australia, Katie Kelly.
So that was a fantastic moment. So we qualified for Rio. Thank you. So now we're in 2016, the year begins, and I thought this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was happy to step down from my job. I've been working corporate life for 20 years. I thought I can be an elite athlete. I'm going to make the most of it. So the year begins with a race in January, and my body just wasn't feeling quite right. I mean, I'd put it through a little bit over the last few years with the endurance event, and by the end of February, I had a stress fracture of the right rib, which I'm sort of showing my age when I'm hanging around 21-year-olds at the AIS, but it's a common rowing injury. It's an unusual, it's not a common triathlete injury. So it was really because of my load. And so pretty much from February to June, I wasn't to train. I did not swim, bike or run for 4 months in what's the biggest year of my sporting life. I was out of action. I just had to do rehab. So that picture there is me at the AIS. And you hear athletes talk about rehab. It's just repetitive, simple exercises to keep the body moving, to keep the muscles activated, that sort of thing. So, and it was the Canberra winter. My partner put up a lot. I was a bit grumpy, but it really challenged me to think about things differently. I was so used to doing something every day, and suddenly I wasn't working and I wasn't training. So I had to sort of refocus and think about how I approached my day. And you know, I read some great books, but I had a routine. But certainly, I look back and think it was kind of the growth that I needed. I had to stop and just sort of slow down and just sort of get a bit more perspective on a few things. So June this year, finally the rehab team handed me back to my coach. We've got 12 weeks until Rio. I kept seeing the countdowns to Rio, and I didn't want to know that there was 100 days to go. I wasn't, I was thinking, I'm so unfit, I'm out of condition. And we had 12 weeks. So the coach had me back, and we went on a 12-week training program that took us to Gold Coast, Townsville and Florida. It was the most intense 12 weeks in terms of training and preparation. Everything from nutrition, recovery, and to get this body happening and moving and backing up for each session. I remember at the end of that 12 weeks in Florida, so this is 2 weeks before Rio, the last swimming session. And I love running and riding, but swimming I just find hard. I'm just not a good swimmer. So that last session, it was another 10 by 100 metres, all out efforts, just pain, it hurts. And I remember just floating in the water and looking up at the blue sky and thinking, I've done it, I'm going to Rio, I'm going to make that start line. So from there, from Florida, we flew to Rio. I just wanted to bring up this slide. For me, Team KK sort of became what everyone that's been along this journey, it's just been wonderful to have my friends and family, my sponsors, McKeely Jones. And even last year when we started this out, I had to raise $20,000 to get a tandem custom-made bike that was in that video. It was made in America. I had over 130 individuals, a couple of companies, but mostly individuals, $20, $50, $100. And it was just so fantastic. And for me, a lot of the joy you get is being able to share it with people. And I've certainly had that. These are all the sponsors that I've managed to get on board. And I've had no Jerry Maguire moments. These are all my own contacts and connections. And what I'm really proud of, some smaller companies, bigger companies, and people like Human Synergistics and Harvey Norman have come on board without expecting any real return of investment. And I think that's nice when you have that kind of business relationship. It's about trust and there's a mutual respect. So I've had wonderful support. Just a couple of quick photos from the Rio Paralympics. There's my mum and dad there, Eiley and Jerry, in the green and gold, Team KK. It was just, I don't have to, but as a parent with children, you're just so proud. And like mum just didn't stop crying all week. It was just amazing. So I just wanted to finish on this slide, and I know you're all incredible and you've got such busy lives and have your own individual success. But these are just three sort of I guess, takeaway points that really helped me, particularly in these last sort of few months leading into Rio, because it was so intense. Like I was just relieved to get to that finish line. But pressure, balance and team. I heard Serena Williams recently talk about pressure is a privilege, and I think it is for us. I mean, how lucky are we that we can, we have all the basic needs and we're in this environment where I can just go and train. Like, what a life. And so, but it's just about having perspective of that. Yes, I had this fantastic environment of training as an athlete, but for me, balance is so important, and there's so many other things that I need in my life to balance off this very intense, small micro environment of being an elite athlete. And I think that's very important, particularly for the younger kids. And team, having everybody involved that I did just made this all so much more enjoyable. Honesty and integrity, just two things that I just keep coming back to in everything I do. For me, success, I wanted to know when I crossed that finish line, whatever the result was. I wasn't so worried about that, but I just wanted to know that I'd done everything that was true to my values, true to myself, my friends and family, because there's so many distractions, and there always is for all of us. And egos come into play and other sort of materialistic things, and I really have to come back and focus on what is it that's really important and why I'm doing this. So they're two things that are really important for me. And then celebration and joy. To celebrate your successes. We're all so goal-orientated. We're working towards that next goal. And just enjoy that when that comes, and celebrate that with people that you love, and take the moment I'm just on this nice hazy couple of weeks at the moment. Like, it's really just a nice place to be. And then in terms of joy, I remember it was 2 weeks ago, here I am in the most intense race. It was so intense. And 100 metres, 500 metres from the finish line, I could see the finish line. And McKeely always, because of my sight, I don't really know who's in front of me, how far. And she said, KK, you can start celebrating now, And she does that for me in races. And we're on the blue carpet, like it's crowd is roaring. And I thought, no, I need that finish line first, because I just had to be there to know that I could really celebrate it and that I earned it. But I never forget, and I love that photo, that moment that I grabbed that banner, and it will stay with me forever. And just saying, I've done it. That was the moment. So thank you for your time today. Thank you.